Have you ever had everything you thought you wanted, only for it all to come crashing down in a single moment? I'm not talking about losing a job or missing a flight. This was something much deeper. This was a betrayal that cut through the very core of my soul. It wasn't just the love I lost, it was the trust. The thing you never think will shatter until it does. And then it all came apart. Let me tell you how it happened. My name is David Matthews. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas, a place I've called home for most of my life. I've built a life here that I thought was unshakable. I'm a project manager for a tech company, so my work keeps me busy, but it also gives me purpose. My life wasn't a whirlwind of excitement or adventure, but I found peace in it. I had Sophie, the woman who I thought was my soulmate. We had built something together, brick by brick, over the last 5 years. We laughed together. We planned our future. We shared our dreams. It all seemed perfect. I thought we had it all. I had the job, the apartment, the woman I adored. I thought I knew exactly where my life was headed. But you don't expect the cracks to show. You don't see them when everything seems so right. That's the funny thing about trust. You never realize how fragile it is until it breaks. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything changed. Sophie and I were sitting on the couch in our cozy living room, the kind of place that felt like it could never be anything but warm and comforting. We were making plans as usual, talking about our vacation in the spring, about our future the next 5 years. We laughed at the silly little things, and I thought, this is it. This is the life I've worked for. But even as I sat there, I couldn't shake this feeling. Something was off. It wasn't a big thing. It was subtle. Sophie was distant just a little, not in a noticeable way, but I noticed she had been more distracted lately, her mind elsewhere when we were together. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was being paranoid. Maybe she was just busy with work. But then the silence started to grow between us. And that's when I realized things weren't as perfect as I'd convinced myself they were. The betrayal hadn't hit yet. It was just a whisper in my mind, a feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't know then what was coming, but soon enough I would. And when it hit, it shattered everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the person I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. Let me tell you how it all fell apart. I'll never forget the first time I met Sophie. It was at a friend's party, one of those casual gatherings where you don't expect to meet anyone special. But then, there she was. Her smile was like a spark lighting up the room, and when she laughed, it was like music. Sophie had a way of making you feel like the only person in the room, like nothing else mattered except the moment you were sharing. She had that magnetic charm, the kind that drew you in and made you want to stay. At first, I didn't even believe I stood a chance with someone like her. I was just a regular guy, quiet, focused, and a little emotionally reserved. But Sophie, with her warmth, made me feel like I mattered. It didn't take long before I was hooked. She was the answer to all my loneliness, the one I had been waiting for without even realizing it. Over the next few months, things just clicked. We spent hours talking, laughing, planning our future together. The more time we spent together, the more I felt like I was finally complete. I started opening up to her, something I'd never done with anyone before. Sophie made me feel safe, like I could show her the parts of myself I'd kept hidden. For once, I wasn't just the guy who worked hard and kept his feelings in check. I was just David, and she made me feel like I was enough. But over time, I noticed small things. Nothing huge, nothing that could tear apart everything we had, but enough to make me question myself. Sophie would pull away during certain moments, her thoughts seemingly drifting to somewhere far away. We'd be in the middle of a conversation, and she'd suddenly go quiet, lost in thought. I'd ask if something was wrong, but she'd always wave it off. Just work, she'd say. It's nothing. I convinced myself that it was just stress. After all, Sophie was an ambitious woman, dedicated to her career. She worked long hours, and there were times when I knew she was juggling a lot. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Everything was fine, right? We were fine. Looking back, it feels like I was living in a dream. Every evening spent with Sophie felt like a scene from a movie. We'd have dinner on our small balcony, watching the sunset together, talking about our dreams, our fears, and everything in between. I remember our first trip to the beach, how we stayed up late under the stars, wrapped in a blanket, laughing about silly things. Sophie had this way of making every moment feel extraordinary. She'd always encourage me to open up more. David, don't hide yourself from me, she'd say. I want to know the real you. And so I did. I shared things with her that I hadn't told anyone, memories, hopes, the struggles I'd faced growing up. Sophie listened, really listened, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my thoughts. She understood me in a way no one else had. But as time passed, Sophie started to mention her ex-boyfriend. She didn't do it often, but when she did, there was a certain tone in her voice, a softness that I couldn't ignore. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was part of her past, and I understood that. But then the comparisons began. She'd say things like, "You remind me so much of him, the way you care for people. He used to do that too." Or, "You both have this quiet strength, but he could never open up the way you do. You're different, David. Better." At first, I took it as a compliment, as though Sophie was trying to tell me that I was better than the man who came before me. But it started to eat at me. Every time she brought him up, even in passing, I felt a twinge of insecurity. Why was she still talking about him? Did she still think about him? Was I just a replacement for someone else? I brushed it off, though. I told myself it was nothing. She loved me, didn't she? We were building something together. Sophie was the woman I'd been waiting for, and nothing could take that away. Still, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind those comparisons, something I wasn't seeing. It started slowly, these cracks in our relationship. At first, I told myself it was just the natural ebb and flow of life. Sophie was busy, her career demanding, her ambitions ever-growing. I could understand that. But then the missed dates started piling up. The evenings we had planned together, now empty, Sophie would apologize, her voice full of regret. "I'm sorry, David. Work just got crazy. You know how it is." But it wasn't just one or two missed dates. It was almost every week. And it wasn't like her. Sophie had always made time for us, for me. But now I could feel the distance between us growing, and I didn't know what to do. Every time I asked, Sophie would smile, that sweet, reassuring smile of hers, the one that used to make me feel safe, and she'd blame it on her job. "I'll make it up to you," she'd say, her eyes shining with the promise of better days. And still I believed her. I didn't want to face the truth. Not yet. Sophie was everything to me, and I was scared to lose her, scared that maybe I wasn't enough. But my instincts, the ones I'd learned to trust over the years, kept nagging at me. Something was off. Sophie was no longer the woman who made me feel like the center of her world. It was like I was being pushed further and further to the edge, but she was still just out of reach. And no matter how hard I tried to fill the silence between us with affection, gifts, and grand gestures, the more distant she became. It was as though I was running in circles trying to prove my worth, when all along the answer was slipping right through my fingers. So I tried harder. I planned surprises. I bought flowers, cooked her favorite dinners. I even took a day off work to surprise her with a weekend getaway, hoping to rekindle the flame that once burned so brightly between us. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that I was doing all this for nothing. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I had just finished work early, and a thought crossed my mind. I'll surprise her today. It was impulsive, a fleeting idea, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I wanted to see her, to remind her of what we had, to remind her that we were still a team. So, without much hesitation, I grabbed my jacket and headed for her apartment. I hadn't planned on arriving early, but as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw her car, a sleek, silver sedan that I knew too well, parked next to Mark's. My stomach tightened. Mark, my best friend, the one guy I trusted more than anyone else. My first thought was to brush it off. Maybe they had made plans. Maybe he was just giving her a ride. Something innocuous. But as I sat in my car, something in me stirred. A gut feeling that I couldn't ignore. I watched as Sophie stepped out of the building, laughing. Mark followed her out, his hand casually resting on her back. The sight of them together, laughing in a way that felt too intimate, sent a chill down my spine. Sophie, my Sophie, was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her eyes were brighter, and her laugh, it was different. It wasn't the laugh I'd once shared with her. This was something new, something I didn't recognize. I couldn't look away. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched them walk toward their cars. Sophie's hand brushed against Mark's arm, and the way they exchanged a playful look, an inside joke, something private, made me feel like an outsider in my own life. Then they hugged. A long, lingering hug. Sophie's arms wrapped around Mark, and for a brief moment, I saw her bury her face against his chest. It was intimate, far too intimate for just friends. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. The world around me felt distant, muffled. My mind raced as the reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat there, frozen, watching them. Every moment felt like an eternity. I wanted to confront them right there, to storm out of my car and demand answers. But I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, caught in the web of confusion and disbelief. I knew something was wrong, but seeing it with my own eyes, it shattered something inside of me. As they finally pulled away from each other, Sophie glanced toward my car, as if sensing I was there. But I couldn't bring myself to move, to leave. I needed more. I needed to know. I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Sophie and Mark together. I spent the whole night in a restless haze, my mind replaying every moment, every look, every touch. I couldn't let this gnaw at me anymore. My hands were shaking as I stood in front of Sophie that morning, my words a mixture of pain and confusion. "Sophie, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though it cracked with the weight of everything I had seen. "What happened last night? With Mark?" Her face instantly went blank, the warmth she once had for me vanishing in an instant. Sophie took a step back, her expression defensive, like she had been preparing for this moment. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice too calm for my liking. "What are you accusing me of, David?" I felt the anger rising, but I fought to keep my cool. I saw you. With him. The way you two were, laughing, hugging. It didn't look like just friends. What's going on, Sophie? She took a deep breath, her eyes flicking away from mine. David, you're imagining things. Mark's just a friend. We've been friends for years. There's nothing more to it. She stepped closer to me, her hand resting on my arm. Her touch meant to soothe, but it felt like ice. You're just being paranoid. You know how stressful work's been for me. I've been under a lot of pressure, and you're making it harder with these accusations. My heart sank. It didn't feel like she was trying to explain. It felt like she was covering something up. Sophie, I'm not imagining this. I saw what I saw. I saw you two together. You were too close. I'm not crazy. She shook her head, her lips pulling into a tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. David, I don't know why you can't trust me. Why do you always doubt me? I love you, okay? I've been with you, haven't I? But now you're going to accuse me of something that's not even real? She looked at me like I was the one who was broken, like I was the one who had done something wrong. The sting of her words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to scream, to demand she tell me the truth, but instead, I stood there, completely frozen. Sophie's words were like a tidal wave, washing away every ounce of certainty I had left. Doubt seeped into me, and I started questioning myself. Could I really be imagining it all? She kissed me on the cheek, leaving me standing there with my heart heavy as she left for work. But no matter how hard I tried to calm myself, a voice inside me wouldn't let it go. Something wasn't right. There was a hole in the pit of my stomach, gnawing at me relentlessly. I couldn't let it slide. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. The doubt gnawed at me for hours. I kept going over it in my mind, each word Sophie had said, each look she gave me. I knew something wasn't right, but I had no proof, no way to confirm my suspicions. Not yet. That night, after Sophie fell asleep beside me, I found myself staring at her phone on the nightstand. I told myself it was wrong, that I shouldn't invade her privacy, but I couldn't help myself. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, my fingers moving with a mind of their own. I unlocked her phone. I shouldn't have, but I did. My heart raced as I opened her messages. At first, it was just small talk, harmless banter with friends and colleagues. But then, my eyes landed on Mark's name. My pulse quickened. I clicked on the conversation. The messages seemed innocent at first, questions about work, the usual pleasantries. But as I scrolled further, I felt a cold sweat forming. There were messages that made my blood run cold. Sophie had been texting him late at night, asking him how his day went, sending him heart emojis, asking him to meet up when I was away on business. My throat tightened, the room spinning as I read more. One message from Sophie read, I miss you. I wish I could see you more, but I know things are complicated. I'll always be here when you need me. And then another, I know we can't be together right now, but you're still the one I think about most. My heart stopped. This wasn't just friendly banter. Sophie had been hiding something from me, something far deeper than I could ever have imagined. But the real blow came when I saw the final message, the one that shattered everything. Mark had written, You're still thinking about him, aren't you? And Sophie had replied, I am, but I've been waiting for something better to come along. That was it, the final confirmation of everything I had feared. Sophie had been seeing Mark behind my back for weeks, maybe longer. She was never truly invested in me. She had always been waiting for someone or something else, something better. And that better was Mark. I felt my entire world tilt on its axis. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. My heart felt as though it was being ripped from my chest. Sophie, the woman I had given my trust and my love to, had been living a lie. And now, I was left with nothing but the shards of my broken heart. Everything fell apart in a matter of days. It was like a cruel, suffocating fog that slowly consumed me, choking out the life I had built. Sophie, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had shattered everything. The trust we'd built over years, the moments of joy we had shared, they all turned to dust in my hands. The smiles, the kisses, the promises. How could they have all been a lie? I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. I thought I was a good partner, a reliable one, someone who cared deeply. I had given her everything, and yet in the end it felt like I was the one who had been played, like I was a fool. For the next few days, I spiraled into despair. I could barely function. I couldn't get the images out of my head, the way she had smiled at Mark, the way she had held him, like I was nothing. I couldn't trust myself anymore. If I couldn't even see this coming, then how could I trust anything, anyone? I pulled away from everyone, friends, family, even my coworkers. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be around people who might ask me questions, who might offer sympathy. I just wanted to be alone with my hurt, alone with the sinking feeling that I had been used, that every intimate moment with Sophie had been nothing more than a performance. I replayed everything, every conversation, every argument, every loving gesture, looking for signs I had missed, signs that she had never really cared. It was like my mind was searching for answers, trying to understand what went wrong. I thought about all the good moments, the laughs we shared, the promises we made, and wondered if any of it had ever been real. I began to question my own worth. Was I too naive? Too trusting? Was there something wrong with me, that Sophie couldn't love me the way I had loved her? Was I simply someone she could use until something better came along? I felt like I had no value, no purpose. If she could betray me so easily, then how could I ever trust again? It was a week later when Sophie reached out. I had expected it, of course, her calling, her texting, her pleading for us to talk. But when I finally picked up the phone, hearing her voice on the other end was like hearing the voice of someone I used to know, someone who no longer belonged in my life. David, she said, her voice full of guilt and softness, I'm so sorry for everything. I messed up. I've been so confused, and I don't know what I was thinking. I need you to understand. There was nothing like what we had. I never meant to hurt you. Her words were like a knife, twisting deeper as she went on. She apologized for the pain she caused, claimed she had needed time to figure things out, that she had been unsure of herself. She begged for my forgiveness, telling me she missed us and wanted to fix what was broken. She promised things would be different, that we could move forward, that we could find a way back to where we were. And for a moment, I almost believed her. It would have been so easy to take her back, to let her into my life again, to forgive her for the things she had done. I could see the desperation in her voice, the hope that maybe, just maybe, I would accept her apology and everything would be okay again. But the truth was, I was no longer the same man I was before. The man who once believed in love above all else, the man who thought that love could fix anything, was gone. What I had gone through, what I had learned in these past few weeks, had changed me in ways I couldn't fully explain. I had spent so long depending on Sophie for validation, for love, for reassurance. But now, I realized that I had been living for someone else. I had been waiting for someone to tell me I was worth something, to tell me that I mattered. And in doing that, I had neglected the most important thing, myself. So, as I sat on the phone with Sophie, I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was at peace. And as I spoke, my voice was steady, unwavering. Sophie, I said quietly, I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not the man I was when we first met. I've learned something through all of this. I've learned that love isn't about dependency. It isn't about waiting for someone else to give you worth. It's about self-respect. It's about knowing who you are, regardless of what anyone else does or says. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sophie didn't say anything. I think she was expecting me to beg her to stay, to try and salvage what was left. But I didn't. I've moved on, Sophie. Not because of someone else, but because I've learned to trust myself. I don't need your apology. I don't need your love anymore. The words hung between us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need her to tell me everything was going to be okay. I was okay. And with that, I hung up the phone. I walked away, not in anger, but in peace. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within. I heard from Sophie a few more times, but each time, I felt less and less inclined to respond. She sent me texts apologizing again, asking to meet up, pleading for a second chance. But I never answered. I wasn't mad at her anymore. I didn't even feel betrayed in the way I thought I would. I had found something stronger than anger. I had found my own sense of self-worth. And I realized with absolute clarity that I was better off without her. Not because she had hurt me, but because I had learned that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough on my own. Months had passed since I made the hardest decision of my life, walking away from Sophie. At first, everything felt empty. The quiet of my apartment, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with silence. I spent long nights questioning everything, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But little by little, the pieces began to fall back into place. I started focusing on myself, rediscovering the passions I had let slip away during the years I had spent wrapped up in a relationship that, in hindsight, was never truly mine. I took on new challenges, ones that scared me at first, but now I welcome them. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had always been there for me, even when I was too consumed by Sophie to notice. Their support, their understanding, filled the gaps that Sophie had once occupied. I found joy in things I had forgotten I loved, running through the trails by the lake, reading books that had sat untouched on my shelf for far too long, and working on projects that lit a fire in me. The life I had once believed was built around her was, in reality, a life I could shape and live on my own terms. I wasn't dependent on anyone's approval anymore. I had become my own person again. Sophie's absence became a reminder that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough as I was, and that realization was liberating. Every day I grew stronger, more independent, and, if I'm being honest, wiser. The lessons of the past hadn't been easy to learn, but they had been necessary. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and self-doubt, but in the end, I had come out on the other side stronger than I had ever been before. The old me, the man who had been so consumed by love and the need to be loved, had been replaced by someone new. And that person knew, without a doubt, that betrayal doesn't define who you are. It's what you do afterward that does. Just as I was beginning to settle into this new chapter, as I was finally at peace with the past and looking forward to the future, I received a message that I didn't expect. It was from Mark. David, the message began, "I know this might be the last thing you want to hear, but Sophie reached out to me. She's been asking for forgiveness, not just from you, but from everyone she's hurt. She says she's learned her lesson, that she's been trying to make things right." A knot twisted in my stomach. I hadn't heard from either of them in months, and I had convinced myself that this part of my life was over. But here it was again. Sophie, once more trying to rewrite the story. I took a deep breath, my mind swirling. Part of me wanted to hear more, to understand what had happened to her. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was finally taking responsibility for her actions. But the other part of me, the part that had moved on, that had finally found peace, knew the truth. The past didn't belong to me anymore. I had put it behind me, and there was nothing left for me in that chapter. So I sat there, staring at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen, wondering if I should respond. But then I realized I didn't need to know what was happening with her anymore. The story was over. I don't need to know, Mark. I typed back, my fingers steady. The past is where it belongs. And with that, I put the phone down. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had learned everything I needed to from that time in my life. What happened with Sophie didn't define me. What I did with the rest of my life, now, that was the only thing that mattered. And so, I moved forward. My life no longer shaped by the betrayals of the past, but by the lessons I had learned and the strength I had found within myself. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder, will Sophie ever truly face the consequences of her actions?